So Roy is the first one up.
Cool.
Oh, and here's a land flipping question. That's interesting. Let's open that one up. All right. So Roy says, hey, Bradley, so we purchased the land profit generator program for our first campaign, and we sent out 575 direct mails to a county, in North Carolina, and almost 3,000 to a county in Arizona. So far, we've gotten 16 people who are interested in selling their land. But after we looked at the land, they have really only 8 of them are worth making offers for. And most of them want a way higher price than the number we need in order to turn a profit on the deal. So right now we're a little bogged down by it because we spent so much on sending out the direct mails and they really didn't get anything good in return. Would you suggest that going forward, we keep sending out more direct mails and maybe pick our county more wisely? If so, how would you suggest that we pick our counties? And do you think that the land flipping business model is still worth doing today? Or do you think it's gotten very competitive over the years and probably not worth doing now? Okay, I'm going to answer that last question first. Do I think it's still worth doing today? Absolutely. And do I think it has gotten overly competitive and not worth doing now? No, not at all. And here's the reason why. Because COVID and because of inflation and the state of our economy and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot of people that are hurting for money right now. And so I think right now is actually a really, really, really good time to be in the land flipping business, because there's a lot of people that have inherited properties or, just have vacant land parcels that aren't producing any revenue. In fact, it's a tax liability. If it's not generating revenue for you and you pay property taxes on it, it's a liability. It's not an asset, right? So there's a lot of people out there that would take money for their property if they had the opportunity or if they knew, right? And again, when I was flipping land and sending out letters, I would get replies back from people that would be offended with the offers that I would make, but then would still accept them. Like, I'm not kidding. I had people write me back letters that would say, like, you ought to be ashamed of yourself for offering me such a low amount for my property, but I'm tired of paying taxes on it, so I accept. Like, I'm not kidding. I got letters like that. So the thing that I'm trying to say is, first of all, I don't think it's overly competitive. I don't think it's saturated. I think it's a good time to be in the land flipping business because it's a tangible asset. And again, you can actually help people that are hurting for money by buying their land that's not producing any revenue for them. In fact, they have to pay out of pocket for taxes every year. So that kind of answers that question first. Second, I think you went way beyond what I would have done as far as the number of letters mailed, especially when you're just dipping your toes in the water. You know what I mean? To test the kind of that's a lot of mail to send out 3,000 letters in one shot. That's a lot. First of all, when I was even a year and a half into the business, I did it about 2 years, but a year and a half into the business, it was run very efficiently because I had outsourced, trained VAs how to do most of the stuff. And so I was only spending maybe 4 to 6 hours a week on the business. And it was still producing very well for me every month, a minimum of 4 figures in profit, and many months, 5 figures. I never cracked 18,000 in a month. But I made every single month, I made profit. And all I was sending out consistently was 250 to 300 letters per week. That's it. 250 to 300 letters per week, week in and week out, every single week. That's how I did it. So I would send out anywhere between 1,000 to 1,200 letters per month. And I was generating 4 to 5 figures per month in revenue from just land flipping, working 4 to 6 hours. That's after I had learned the business and developed a bunch of SOPs and trained everybody. So I'm not saying you're going to be able to run a business in 5 or 10 hours a week right off the bat. It's going to take you some time to get to that point. But why I bring this up is because that's a lot of damn mail to send out all at once. And even when I had a lot of the work, the grunt work of analyzing properties and all that kind of stuff outsourced, I was only sending out 250 to 300 letters per week. Again, 1,000 to 1,200 letters per month. That's it. Because that was all the volume that I needed or wanted really to achieve the revenue goals that I wanted and stay within that time frame that I had allotted, because I was still doing SEO and semantic mastery and all this other stuff, right? So for me, that was all I needed to have a business that produced consistently for me as a side hustle, and it was great. So I would say I wouldn't want to send out 3,000 letters all at once, because that would bring so many leads in if you pick proper counties. And unfortunately, there's no way that you can figure out which are the best counties to market to without testing, right? It's a trial and error thing, just like SEO is, just like anything, right? You can have an idea, you can do research and everything else and try to make the best educated decision as to where to spend your marketing dollars, but you won't know until you start testing. And the same thing goes with counties. Like I said, in the state of Virginia, which is where I only flipped one property outside of the state of Virginia, which was in West Virginia. But in the state of Virginia is where I flipped properties, and I probably sent direct mail out to, at least 15, maybe 20 counties in the state of Virginia over the course of that 2 years that I was doing that as a side business. And what I found was there was about 5 counties that produced every time I mailed to them. And so what I did was after, again, a bunch of trial and error, I found that those 5 counties were the ones that I would hit every other month or every 3 months with the same list. I would hit the same mailing list over again every 2 or 3 months with another batch of letters. Because again, time and circumstance changes everything, right? Because people will change their mind over time, especially if they keep seeing, it's the same thing online, guys. You see an ad over and over and over again. It causes brand recognition. It starts to develop a level of trust, like seriously, and it's just through recognition and all that kind of stuff. So I would say, especially when you're starting out, spending that much money on mail before you've really kind of worked out what are the best areas to target and all that kind of stuff is not an efficient way to spend your money. And by the way, I'm not picking on you, Roy. You can't know what you don't know, and you won't know these things until you try it, right? And so I love the fact that you took action, period. Like that, I commend you for that. All I'm saying is I think I would throttle that down a bit and spend your money more selectively with smaller batches, and then in different counties within the chosen states. And something else I want to recommend is pick one state and stick within one state and test different counties in that state until you find some that start to produce consistently or well, you get a higher response rate from. And also you'll learn that through analyzing properties, once you start getting inbound leads from your outreach, you'll find that some counties are going to be easier to do the property research and get comparable sales data and all that kind of stuff for than other counties. So again, that's a process of elimination. You'll start to identify the counties that are easier to work in, provide more data, higher response rates, et cetera. But all of that requires trial and error. So again, that's why I say it's better to start with smaller batches and spread it out over wider or more areas and monitor the results. You have to track everything. And the ones that start giving the higher response rates, and then you start doing the property research and determine, hey, this is a county that the data is easily accessible and things like that. Then you can say, okay, well, look, this one produced well. I can find the property records easily, blah, blah, blah. There's comparable sales, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to choose this as one of my farming areas or farming territories, meaning I'm going to hit this over and over again. Like I said, every 3 months, quarterly. So 4 times a year, you're going to send out a batch of letters to that same county, that same list, and you'll see it'll start to produce. It's the same thing with like email marketing, right? You send out a sequence of emails and you get a higher response rate at email number 5 than you do at email number 1 or number 2. It's the exact same thing with direct mail. So that's why I said unfortunately, there's no way for me to tell you other than just through trial and error as to how to identify which counties are the best. But so spend less and spread it out over more areas and track the results. And then you'll start to identify those areas that bear or produce more fruit, if that makes sense. And I say stay within one state because the way, especially if you're new to doing real estate closings, the laws vary by state. And so it's important to kind of get familiar with the contract law of the particular state that you're working in, and the closing process or the settlement process and all of that kind of stuff. And so again, I focused all of my business in the state of Virginia. I got a West Virginia lead that I ended up flipping that property. And then I started to expand into Tennessee right before I closed shop. And I closed shop so I could go back full time in the SEO. But so anyway, like I said, I think you just, perhaps chose maybe an area that wasn't the greatest area. And also, like I said, I think you went too aggressive for your first mailing, and you probably spent a lot of money. And you can see that that's not really, again, once you kind of identify the areas that produce better results, then you can scale your spending, right? You do more mailing to them or bigger batches of mail, but start slow and work your way up. And that's my advice. I don't know if that's what Jack Bosch teaches or not. That's just how I ran my business. And it worked really well. Again, it fit and the constraints of the time that I had available to spend on that business. If that's clear. So anyway, that's a very small response rate. So again, my thoughts were, I think, I can't remember. I'd have to go back to my notes and all that, but I believe I was getting somewhere around a 20% response rate, which was pretty good, 15 to 20% response rate. One other thing I do want to mention is before we move on, and I know I spent a lot of time on this, guys, but there's not a lot of questions, and I thought this was a pretty good topic. When you say but after we looked at the lands that they have, only 8 of them are worth making offers for. Okay, why do you say that? Here's the thing, guys. If you're flipping, if you're in the land flipping business or real estate flipping business, period, but we're talking about vacant land here, why would you say that there's only, out of 16 properties, only 8 of them are worth making offers on? Why not make offers on all 16? Make offensively low offers. If you don't think the property's worth making an offer on, then just make an offensively low offer, like something that you should be ashamed of yourself for making an offer, because why not? Like if they say yes, now you got a property for next to nothing. And so again, even if you think it's a junk property, what you think is junk is another man's gold. And I mean that. I found properties that I would make offensively low offers on because I looked at it, I was like, this is a piece of junk. I don't want it, but I'm still going to offer them $1,000, right? Or $500. No kidding. And I would get people that would take me up on the offer. 1.5 acres, 2 acres, and it doesn't perk, meaning it won't allow a septic field. So you can't build there. And it's 1.5 acres, and I sent them an offer, and they say, oh no, we want $5,000 for this 1.5 acres. And I send them an offer, a written contract offer with a earnest money or binder deposit for $300. And then that's where I would get stuff back, like a reply, like, you ought to be ashamed of yourself making such a low offer on my property, but I'm tired of paying taxes on it, so I accept. Like, I'm not kidding. That kind of shit happens. And so what I'm saying is, it's 1.5 acres of property that market value, because it doesn't perk, would only be, $1,500, $2,000, and I make an offer for $300, and they take it. Now I can turn around and put that right back on the market, because remember, all I'm doing is selling a contract. I'm not actually taking ownership of the property, just locking it up under contract and then marketing the contract. We're real estate marketers, not investors, unless you're actually buying and holding. So I would put the contract right back on the market and say $1,000 or whatever, $800 or whatever, and say right in the listing, does not perk. And then I would have contractors call me and say they needed a lot to store their equipment or sea containers where they could put materials, building materials and things like that. So again, you don't know what you think is valuable and not valuable doesn't mean that other people don't think that it's value. So in other words, you might see a property that you don't think is valuable, but others might for various reasons. So just make offensively low offers. That's the thing. And by the way, who cares what they want for the offer? It doesn't matter what they want. It's what you offer. That's what matters. All that matters is whether they accept it or not. It doesn't matter what they want. You make the offer at whatever you feel that you can make that deal profitable for. And so even properties that you don't think are worth a damn, offer something stupid low. And then if they accept it, now you've got a property that you can just mark up slightly and turn around and sell it and make a quick profit for some piece of junk property that you had no desire in whatsoever, but you still bought it cheap enough. Remember, you don't make your money in the sale, you make your money in the purchase, right? Seriously, if you buy it low enough, you can make money on it. And that's the other thing, guys. Last part, and I'll move on, I promise. With the contracts, I always put a weasel clause in. I know I always called it a weasel clause. I do that now. I got a property on a contract right now that I was just talking about that I'm going to be closing on for my own personal use. And I always put a weasel clause in there, and it says like my weasel clause is subject to the buyer's approval of a soil test. Right? It doesn't say subject to a perk test approving for a 2-bedroom septic field or whatever, or 2-bed, 2-bath septic, whatever. It doesn't say that, because then I would be locked into purchasing the property if the soil test came back saying, yes, it approves for a septic field. I always put in subject to buyer's approval of whatever the test is or the feasibility study work is, because then it's subjective. I can back out of the contract by just saying, well, I don't approve. Yeah, it did perk, but I don't approve. And I've done that before where I've locked a property up under contract with what I call a weasel clause. And I submitted the offer to a realtor, a real estate professional. And I use air quotes because a lot of realtors don't know what the fuck they're doing. I swear to God. And I would send the contract offer with that language stating subject to buyer's approval of soil test or whatever, or survey or whatever. And then they would present it to their client. The client would accept the offer. And then when I backed out because I wasn't able to sell it or whatever the case may be, which happened a few times, then the realtor would come back and say, well, you have to buy, you're under contract. And I would say, no, I put in read the addendum, subject to buyer's approval. I don't approve. And then they'd say, oh, well, that's sneaky. Wait a minute. You're the real estate professional. You're the realtor. You advised your client on this contract. You wrote it up and presented it to them and they signed it. You as the real estate professional should understand contract law better. Why am I, the layman, the civilian, smarter on contract law than you? And I'm not saying that to be arrogant, guys. I'm saying that because if you understand contract law and things like that, and that's why I say it's important to understand your state, then you can do things like that to protect yourself as the buyer. Does that make sense? Anyway, I thought that was a great question because it's relevant and to something that I'm doing currently right now. But it's, like I said, I know Jack Bosch's contracts, 6 months, 180 days to closing. So you get 6 months. Every now and then I would catch some grief from a seller about the 6 month closing date. And they'd say, well, why is it going to take 6 months? And I would always use the statement, well, because I've got other transactions in progress and I need to free up capital. That's what I would always say. And so sometimes I would have to shorten that closing time from 6 months to 4 months or 3 months. And if I thought I could sell it, then I would. But the point that I'm trying to make is that, it states all these are very clearly described in the contract, like buyer or contract owner can market the contract for sale, all that kind of stuff. So again, you're covered, right? So anyway, great topic. I still love that business. I truly do. Eventually I'll get back into doing it when I have more time. Anyway, I thought that was a great question. So